Hello again, everybody, and welcome to my 7th review. If you haven't watched my previous reviews, I just would like to explain a little bit of how I do these reviews. What I do is I go back through the episode, go over the stuff that happens in the episode, and I add in my own thoughts and opinions and any relevant backstory that applies to what's going on or what's being talked about. Also, I am not exactly a book reader. I started watching the show before I ever heard about the books, and then I started reading the books after season 2, I believe. And I'm still only about 2/3 of the way through book 2, so I don't read ahead, so you don't have to worry about me giving away any book spoilers, and I try very hard not to even give away anything from later episodes in case this is the first time you've watched the show. Now, I will say sometimes, this is important, pay attention to this, or we'll hear more about this later, or things like that. But I try very hard not to spoil anything because I've had many things spoiled for me, and I know it's no fun. So I try to avoid doing that to anybody else. So, all that being said, we'll get into our review here. And this one is for episode 107. Season 1, episode 7, and it is the episode entitled You Win or You Die. Now, the background picture here is the first shot of the show, and it is Tywin Lannister's war camp. And we see a little bit of how many troops he has and how it's all set up and everything's all Lannister red. And we go into the tent in our first scene, and we finally meet the mighty Tywin Lannister, the one behind all these other Lannisters that we've come to know and love so much. And Jaime's actually there. He had fled King's Landing after his fight with Ned, and now he is here at his father's war camp. And basically it starts out with Jaime reading the message, calling Tywin back to King's Landing to answer for his bannerman's crimes. And Tywin asks Jaime, why is Ned Stark even still alive? Attacking him was stupid, but why is he still alive? And Jaime explains that one of his men stabbed Ned through the back of the leg during the fight, and he says that it wouldn't have been clean. So, as you can see, for all of Jaime's faults and flaws and shortcomings, like throwing children out windows and sleeping with his twin sister, but for all of that, he does have some semblance of honor and some in respect to some things. So, this is where Tywin returns with, you spend too much time worrying what other people think about you. And as you can see, that Jaime's not nearly as smug and self-confident with Tywin. It's the first time we've seen him actually almost cowed by somebody he's speaking to, and that has never happened with anybody else in the show that we've seen. But with his father, he's almost like a little boy again. That's the kind of presence Tywin Lannister has and the kind of effect he has on his children. And Tywin also brings up, what do you think when people call you Kingslayer? Does it bother you? And I don't think Jaime says much there. But Tywin looks back at him and he's like, the lion, which is the Lannister sigil, the lion doesn't worry about the sheep's opinions. So basically, he sends Jaime off to attack River Run, Catelyn's homeland, basically where she grew up, and remind them about how Lannisters pay their debts, is what he says. And Jaime says, I didn't realize you valued Tyrion so much. And Tywin's like, he may be the lowest of the Lannisters, but if other people can capture one of our own and hold him, then our name commands less respect, and the family name is all that is going to remain once we're all dead, and that's all that matters. Keep that in mind. That is all Tywin ever cares about, is his legacy and his family name. And you will get to see that a lot as the series goes on. He doesn't care what he has to do as long as the family name and family legacy is strong and lives on. And you can see the beginnings of that here. And you also wonder if him skinning the stag is symbolic, considering what goes on with Robert later in this episode. But anyway, let's see. He basically tells Jamie, you have the blessings of wealth and youth, and you've squandered them all you've done is been a glorified bodyguard to two kings, a drunk and a madman, and you need to become the person you're meant to be now. Take advantage of all the things you have going for you and do something with it, is what he's telling him. So apparently Jamie being on the King's Guard isn't enough for Tywin. He wants him to do even more. So it basically ends there with Jamie getting sent off to the Riverlands to go after Catelyn's home castle, Riverrun. And then we get our lovely walk through the royal gardens with Ned and Cersei. And Cersei's like, oh, well, you're in pain. Maybe you should go home. And, yeah. And Ned's not really listening to any of that. He just tells her flat out that he knows the truth that Jon Arryn died for. And he also, and she says, oh, is this a riddle? She's, still playing innocent, like she doesn't know what he's talking about. And he asks her if Robert has hit her before, and she said, oh, my brother would have killed him. And Ned responds with, your brother or your lover? So he's definitely putting it straight to her. And her response is, oh, the Targaryens wed siblings to each other for centuries to keep bloodlines pure. And she says that her and Jamie are more than siblings. They shared a womb. They belong together, is what she says. So I guess that's her defense for her love life. And Ned says, so my son Bran saw you. That's what led to him falling, isn't it? And she asks Ned if he loves his children, and he says yes, and she says no more than I love mine. So that is Cersei's strongest point you'll see is her love for her children. That is, I guess, the one good thing about her. But she also goes and talks about on their wedding night, Robert was drunk and crawled on top of her and whispered Lyanna. So she's basically saying that her and Robert never had a chance, which kind of goes back to that conversation in a previous episode where her and Robert are discussing their marriage. The one that everybody likes, even though it wasn't in the book. That conversation. Amazing, isn't it? But anyway, Ned tells her basically that, when Robert comes back, he's going to tell him, and he wants Cersei to take her children and get out of there because Robert will kill them, and he doesn't want their blood on his hands. So he's basically telling her, that he knows what's going on, giving her a chance to get away. So, and he says, that Robert's wrath will follow her, and she says, what of my wrath? And she says, the biggest mistake you ever made was not taking the throne when you had the chance, and you should have. And Ned says, no, that wasn't a mistake. And she says, oh, yes, it was. And then, of course, we get our title placement, double title placement. She finishes with, when you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. So we get the show title and the episode title. So that's definitely a nice little bit that happens in that scene. So that is basically Cersei telling Ned, or Ned and Cersei telling each other, what's going to happen, and see which one goes along with which one here. Alright, so then we go to Littlefinger, Peter Baelish, and his hooker lessons. I don't know. He's basically, having two of his prostitutes practice. But the important thing about this scene is not so much the two girls, because, that falls into that sexposition category that everybody talks about when they talk about season 1. But it's basically Peter explaining his worldview a bit. And this, because it's so early in the series, a lot of people may not have put that much weight in this conversation, but this conversation basically spells out everything you need to know about Littlefinger, if you just listen to what he says and the way he talks. So we see in this scene that Roz has now arrived, Roz, the one hooker in the north, has now arrived, and he's basically telling them, to practice on each other, and he's saying, oh, now he's winning you over. He knows he's better than other men, and although he's making it sound like he's trying to talk about the guy that the prostitutes are supposedly going to be with, he's talking about himself. You can tell. He says he knows he's better than other men. He's always known. And so you get an idea of his own opinion of himself there. And they ask him to join them, and he says, no, I'm saving myself for another. And Roz is like, oh, you sound like you're in love. He's like, yes, I have always been in love. For many years, most of my life. But I was her little confidant, and she had eyes for another. And we can pretty much get here that he's talking about Catelyn Tully Stark. So he goes into a little bit of talk about how Catelyn was in love with Brandon, and he challenged Brandon to a duel to try to win Catelyn, and he lost the duel. But then Catelyn wouldn't let Brandon kill him. Remember, Brandon was Ned's older brother, who Catelyn was originally engaged to. But now he says that she's with an even more impressive man, and that would be his brother. And she loves him because he's just so good. Is basically, we get a lot more of an opinion from Littlefinger about Catelyn and Ned and how he feels about both of them. And he says that he's learned, after that duel and the scar that he got from Brandon, that he's never going to win their way. And he says, and I quote, I'm not going to fight them, I'm going to fuck them, is what he says. And I think Roz asks what he wants, and he says, oh, everything, my dear. So definitely get a lot more insight into Littlefinger. So pay attention to that. You're going to see a lot of that coming to pass as the series goes on. And now we move back to Winterfell, and Osha is now working as a servant for the Starks. She was the wildling they captured who tried to attack Bran, and Robb took her prisoner instead. And Theon comes in, and he's giving her attitude, I guess, typical Theon attitude. And he's saying, oh, well, where I come from, we would have killed you for attacking a noble boy, and we would have let you lay out and be drowned by the tide and all this other, just, yay, Greyjoys, hear us roar, even though that's the Lannister. That's the Lannister saying, but that's the way Theon talks about his family, who he hasn't even been with for 9 years. So he's got a lot of Greyjoy pride going on here. And she asks where he's from, and he says the Iron Islands, and she said she's never heard of it. Or he says, oh, haven't you heard of it? And she's like, oh, well, you've never heard of where I am from either. Because, she's from up way north of the wall. And he tells her, you should address me as Lord. And she said, why? It's like, because my father is the Lord of the Iron Islands. And she's like, well, what's that got to do with you? And he says, well, I'll be Lord after him. And she's like, oh, but you're not Lord now. So, he's just pointing out the way things are a little odd, the way they work in the South, as she calls it. And he's like, oh, are you trying to have a go at me? And she's like, I just don't understand you Southerners. He's like, I'm not a Southerner. She's like, everybody's a Southerner to me. So anyway, then he starts, trying to be threatening towards her. And Luwin comes in, and he says, the lady's our guest. And he's like, oh, I thought she was our prisoner. And Luwin says, so are the two mutually exclusive in your experience? So another dig at Theon, because we learned in a previous episode that he's technically a captor of the Starks. Even though he's been treated like a ward or a squire, he's technically a captor. So anyway, eventually Luwin gets Osha to leave, or not Osha, sorry, Theon to leave Osha alone. Sorry, I don't sleep much. Okay, so anyway, he gets Theon to leave, and he says, I'm not going to be here next time that happens. And she says, oh, I'm used to men that are much worse than him and could break him in half or pick their teeth with his bones or something like that. So she's not even, even remotely afraid of Theon because of the way she's grown up and the way she's always lived. And as we saw in the other episode, women in the wildlings, they fight just like the men do. So it's not a, oh, you stay here and I'll protect you, dear, thing. The women fight just as much as the men do in the wildlings. So she can hold her own as well. And that's why she's saying, oh, well, I'm used to men that are much worse than that boy. So then Lewin and her get into a little bit of supernatural talk, because Lewin asks her, why did you come here? And she said, oh, well, I didn't mean to come here. We were trying to go as far south as possible before the long night. And remember, I had said in a previous review, the long night actually refers to a very dark time in the history of Westeros. The darkest time they've ever dealt with, when all the White Walkers were attacking and all these supernatural forces were on the verge of wiping out Westeros, and the Children of the Forest actually helped the people of Westeros fight off the White Walkers and build the wall and all of that. So the Long Night was really a thing. That was the last time the White Walkers had been something that was real, that people believed in, and that was a true danger to the people in the kingdoms. So the Long Night refers to that. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff about it too, with the Night's King and all of this stuff, but we'll not go that far into that. But if you want to know more, you can always go to a wiki of Ice and Fire and look up the Long Night, and it tells you a lot about what was happening during that time. It was pretty bad. So she tells them that she's trying to go south before the long night. So in other words, she's saying it's going to happen again. And he says, you know, that those things aren't real. And they've been dead for thousands of years. And she says, oh, they aren't dead. They weren't dead. They were sleeping. And now they're awake again. So, again, we get the wildlings and the people up north, further north than Winterfell, beyond the wall north. They all believe in what is really happening out there. So, she basically gives her warning, saying, you know, they were asleep and they're not sleeping anymore. So we get more ominous warnings of doom to come with the winter. So, like I said in the previous one, when they say winter is coming, it's the same as saying we're all going to die. So, and the people north of the wall all believe it. Unlike the rest of the kingdoms. Good luck to them, right? So, after this little scene, we go back to our wall, and Sam and John are up patrolling on the top of the wall again, keeping watch, and Sam's talking about girls again, and John's not really paying much attention. He's looking out because he sees some movement, and there's a rider coming back, and Sam's like, oh, it's a rider's returning. I have to go blow the horn. It's 1 blast for rangers, and 2 for wildlings, and 3 for... And they cut him off before we hear what 3's for. But then John runs down because it looks like Benjen's horse. So he goes down to see, and he notices that there's no rider. So Benjen's horse has returned by itself, alone, with nobody on it. So it leads to the question, what happened to Benjen? Why is he not here? So, as we can see, that there's still some unexplained things going on up north, and we have no clue what's happened to Benjen at this point, but his horse has come back with nobody on it. So, it leads one to wonder, was it wildlings? Was it White Walkers? Was it something else? And also, since there's a couple more caps here, I also want to go into a little bit of a definition, because a lot of people who watch the show don't realize that there are 2 different things up north that we saw attacking, or saw in the first episode. The White Walkers were the ones with weapons that were cutting off the heads of the Night's Watchmen. But as you can see, there was the dead girl who was back to life again. Now, the White Walkers are the intelligent beings that control the undead corpses that are brought back to life. And the corpses that are somewhat like zombies, as much as everybody hates that word, they are called wights, while the ones with the weapons and controlling them are the White Walkers. So there are two different things, just for future reference. Okay, now we go back to King's Landing, and Robert has come back from his hunt, and he is basically fatally wounded. And that's pretty much a given that he's going to die from this wound. He was basically gorged by a wild boar on the hunt. So he's dying, and he knows it, and they all know it. And yeah, Robert's dying. And considering all the stuff that we've been talking about with lines of succession, I'm sure this is going to go really well, right? So Robert comes back and he's dying, and Joffrey's at his bedside, and he tells him, "Oh, I should have spent more time with you, or showed you how to be a man, and I was never meant to be a father," and all this other stuff. And Ned comes in, and Robert sends Joffrey away, and he says, "You don't want to see this," and Joffrey leaves. Now Cersei and Pycelle are still there, and Robert goes into explaining that he missed his thrust. He had too much wine, so he didn't manage to get out of the way quick enough of the boar's horns attacking her tusks. And but he did kill the boar, and he said he wants the funeral feast to be the biggest the kingdom has ever seen, and he wants every single person to get a taste of the boar that got him, is what he says. So he eventually sends Cersei and Pycelle away too, just so he can talk to Ned alone, and you can see the look on Cersei's face. She does not want to leave him and Ned alone, considering the conversation that her and Ned had had in the garden earlier in the episode. So she is not looking happy about leaving, but if she says anything, that's gonna put suspicion on her as well. So she eventually leaves, and Robert, he tells Ned to get a quill and paper, and he wants to write out his final will, so to speak, his wishes upon his death. And in his will, he declares Ned to be the one who's going to serve as Lord Regent and Protector of the Realm till his son comes of age. But as Ned's writing this, he doesn't put son. He changes the words to "until my rightful heir comes of age," because at this point, remember, Ned already has gotten it clear in his head that Robert doesn't have any true-born sons. Cersei's kids are all Jaime's. So he changes the will to say his rightful heir. And Robert says, at least they'll say I did this one thing right, when he, writes out his final wishes and everything. And he actually then goes into saying, you were right about Daenerys. You can stop the plans. Let her live, is what he says. So on his deathbed, he has a change of heart about killing Dany, which is, what caused all the problems between him and Ned, that led to, Ned quitting and everything. So, he also tells Ned to make his son better than him. And, Joffrey? Really? Joffrey? Good luck on that one. But anyway, and Ned he responds with, "I'll do everything I can to honor your memory," is what he says about, making his son better than him, because he knows he's not his son. So that's how Robert's final words get delivered, and there's a little bit more of that, and you'll see the paper where Ned changes it to rightful heir and everything. But after this, Ned goes back out of the room and tells Pycelle to give him milk of the poppy, which is kind of like medieval morphine, I guess, for lack of a better description. It's like medieval morphine, what they give to you when there's so much pain you just can't deal with it. Milk of the poppy. So you'll hear that referred to a lot throughout the show, but that's what it's used for. And yes, poppy is a flower. Somebody said they didn't know that poppies were a flower, but yes, they're a flower, and they have something inside them that is basically a painkiller and sort of an opiate as well, I believe. But anyway, So he goes outside and tells Pycelle to give him the milk of the poppy to ease the pain. And Barristan and Renly are out there, and they're all, covered in Robert's blood from bringing him back and everything. And Barristan says he was reeling from the wine, and he commanded us to stand aside. But it was too late. I felled him. I felled again. Because remember, Barristan was, hey, everybody, that's how you spell Daenerys. Nobody seems to know that, but that's how you spell it. Sorry. Anyway, so Barristan says that he felled again, in reference to the fact that he used to serve Dany's father, Aerys, and he wasn't there when Jaime killed Aerys, and now he was there, but he was commanded to step aside, and now another king has died. Another king who he was responsible for protecting. So he's kind of taking the blame himself. But the mention of the wine gets Varys' attention, because Varys is outside as well. And he's like, oh, who gave Robert this wine? And Barristan says, well, his squire did, the Lannister boy. He gave it to him from the king's own wineskin. And Varys is like, how nice of the Lannister boy to make sure Robert did not lack refreshment. So, you can tell that the spider, as they call Varys, the one who knows everything, has his suspicions about, was Robert just drunk? And is that what happened? Or did the Lannister boy, Cersei's cousin, Lancel, actually do something to encourage that death to take place? So you can see Varys has his suspicions about Lancel, because Lancel is a Lannister, and Cersei's the one who appointed him to be Robert's squire. And didn't Varys tell Ned in the last episode that the king was going to die just like Jon Arryn did? And keep in mind, this is also right after Ned had threatened Cersei with the truth. And now suddenly Robert's dead. Or about to die. He's not officially dead yet, but he's about to die. So, makes you wonder. And then Ned also tells them, that Robert changed his mind about killing Daenerys. And so whatever plans you had, unmake them. And Varys says, oh, it's too late. We already sent the people the message to kill Daenerys. So, sorry, you're too late. Took too long for Robert to change his mind. The assassins have already been sent after Daenerys, is what he basically says there. So, Ned's lost that battle as well. So then he wanders off to, go and tend to what he's got to do now. And speaking of Daenerys, now we go back to her. And she is having a conversation, and she's actually speaking Dothraki for most of this conversation. So she's actually learned a lot of Dothraki at this point. And she is explaining to Khal Drogo what an Iron Throne is. And there's no word for throne in the Dothraki language. And she's talking about, well, we can sail across the sea to capture the Iron Throne. And Khal Drogo says, oh, a king has no need of thrones. He only needs a horse. And the world ends at the sea. And because, that's what the Dothraki believe, that the world ends at the sea. And she said, no, the world does not end at the sea. There's many lands across the sea, like where I was born. And she actually says dirts instead of lands, because she's not positive on all the Dothraki words yet. But he just kind of, blows her off and says, not interested in doing that. So, even though Viserys is gone, Khal Drogo he has no interest in, going to Westeros and helping Daenerys get back to her homeland and possibly take the throne that belonged to her father. So he's not interested in any of that, and he just, wants them to stay there and have their baby and live happily ever after, because that always happens in Game of Thrones, right? So anyway, so yeah, Drogo's not interested in hearing about Westeros or the Iron Throne. So then, Daenerys goes to the market with Jorah, and she's talking about, how, Aegon took the kingdoms, and I want to get my throne back. And Jorah says, well, you keep in mind your ancestors took the throne through conquest, just like Robert did. Because originally the 7 kingdoms were 7 separate kingdoms. And Aegon the Conqueror, the first Targaryen king, he conquered 6 of the 7 kingdoms. He couldn't conquer Dorne. And they didn't come into the fold until hundreds and hundreds of years later. He says, Aegon conquered the kingdoms. That's how he got to the throne. And she's like, oh, and he had dragons. So she's still thinking about those dragons. About, if she had dragons, that would make things easier and she could go and conquer the 7 kingdoms. So she just mentions that, of course, because, the Targaryens and their dragons. And Jorah says, oh, well, we don't really know what happened back then, so just have patience. We'll get you home someday. And then he goes and he says he has to check for letters. Letters. So this little spider, well, actually, a little bird working for the spider, gives Jorah a royal pardon. Because, apparently, because of him telling Robert, a.k.a. Varys, about Daenerys' child, he's done his duty. So he's been pardoned by King Robert. And that was why he was spying on Daenerys, so he could get pardoned and go home. And he just got his pardon. And told that he can go home. So, while this is going on, Daenerys goes up to this wine merchant, and he's trying to, sweet talk her into buying something, and then when she speaks to him in the common tongue, he's like, oh, you're from Westeros. So he knows who she is now. And all of a sudden, he decides he has that's slop. You want this wine instead. This is much better. You don't want that other thing. Here, take this. It's special. It's just for you. So, yeah. And Jorah is watching all this. And he intervenes. And he notices that the merchant is acting a little strange. And how he just, was trying to sell her one thing. And as soon as he found out who she was, it's like, oh no, take this instead. So Jorah intervenes. And he comes over and he wants to take a sip of the wine. And he's watching the guy, and the guy's looking kind of shifty. And he sniffs it and looks back at the guy, and the guy's just watching, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? He's expecting something to happen. And so Jorah says, no, you drink it. You drink it first. So, Jorah knows what's going on here. And he tells this guy to drink it first, and the guy's like, no, I'm not good enough to drink it. It's for the Khaleesi, and tries to talk his way out of it, and it's not working. So then he, I think he knocks over the wine or something, and then runs off. And of course, the Dothraki chase him down and catch him. So we can all put together what happened here. This guy was about to poison her, and Jorah caught on and stopped it. Odd, considering he's the one that set that plan into action. Yes, that's right. It was Jorah's fault the assassins came after Daenerys, because Jorah told Varys and Robert about her baby. So it was his fault they were trying to kill her and her baby. But then he stops it at the last moment and doesn't want her to die. So that's what happens there. He got his pardon for having the assassins come after Dany, but then he stops the assassination despite having his pardon. So the question here is, so is he having a change of heart after everything he had done and almost got her and her baby killed? Is he now changing his mind and deciding, oh, I don't really want them dead. I don't really want her killed. I don't want this to happen. And is he giving up his pardon to stick by Daenerys' side when he had been saying to her this whole time that he wants to go home. And the only reason he couldn't go home is because he was a wanted criminal in Westeros, and he's been pardoned, so he would no longer be a wanted criminal, and he could go back home to his people, to his family. But then he stops the assassination from happening. So we're left to wonder, has Jorah switched sides now? Is he now going to support Dany instead of spying for Robert? Makes you wonder, because he could have just let her get killed. He could have just let her get killed and go home. Obviously nobody else had noticed what was going on there, but Jorah did, and he stopped it. So, what does that mean for the future of Jorah? And is he gonna be with Dany now? Or, I guess we'll have to keep watching, huh? So, that's what happens there. Robert's assassins had tried to kill Daenerys, and the Dothraki caught this guy and, took him prisoner. So, we'll have to see what happens now, huh? So, going back, after this scene, we're going to go back to the Wall, where the men of the Night's Watch are now preparing to take their oath. And Jorah's father, Gior, the Lord Commander, is giving his speech about, you came to us as nothing, and now you have the chance to be something. But you're not going to fight for a king, or a glory, or honor, or a woman's love. You're going to fight for the realm. That is what you are now. You are defenders of the realm. You don't owe any fealty to anybody. It's just about the realm and protecting the realm from the things beyond the Wall. And he says, we're all one house now. House Black, I believe he says in this episode. If he doesn't say it in this episode, he does say it later. But he calls it House Black because, they take the black, the men of the Night's Watch all dressed in black. Their base there is called Castle Black, so it's House Black. And Sam is asking Jon, why aren't you happy? You're about to take your oath. And all Jon's thinking about is his missing uncle. He wants to find his uncle. And then they go into a little bit of talk about Jon can't wait to be a ranger because they're the ones that go out on patrol and fight and all that. And Sam's like, oh, I'm going to be a steward, and there's plenty of food in that. So they talk about, do any of you worship the old gods? And Jon says, I do. And Mormont tells him, you can take your vow at the Heart Tree, a mile north of the Wall. And Sam decides he wants to go with Jon. And Alistair's like, what, does House Tarly from the south, from the Reach, do they worship the old gods? And Sam says, no, I was born and named in the light of the Seven, which is the widely accepted religion. He says, I was born and named in the light of the Seven, but they've never answered my prayers. Maybe the old gods will. So I like that line a lot, too. So anyway, they're talking about going to the Heart Tree to take their oath, and then they start getting their assignments. They get assigned to the stewards, or the builders, or the rangers, or the kitchen, depending on their skills. And all this time, we've seen that Jon is a better fighter than everybody, so obviously he's going to be a ranger, right? Well, Sam does get steward, like he thought he would. He ends up being a steward to Maester Aemon. And Maester Aemon is like one of the most important guys there. So, he sees something in Sam, obviously, because he wanted him for his steward. But Jon also gets assigned to be a steward, and this just throws them for a loop. They're like, wait, what? You're going to be a steward, but you're the best fighter here, that kind of thing. And Jon, when he and Sam are talking to Maester Aemon about who goes to who and who goes where, Jon's like, do you take me for a servant? And he's like, no, I took you for a man of the Night's Watch. Was I wrong? So, Jon's not happy. Jon's not happy at all about all this. And the Caps are a little behind, but then they go off, and Jon's still going on about, I don't understand this. Why am I getting sent to the stewards? We know what kind of fighter I am. This doesn't make any sense. And it's not fair. And comes in when him and Sam are talking, and he's like, "You want to talk about fair? This is what happened to me." And Pip says that some High Lord wanted to do things with him, and he didn't want to return this High Lord's affections, and because of that, he got framed for stealing the silver and sent to the wall. He was just a minstrel. He wasn't a criminal of any kind. He just turned down the advances of this nobleman, and because of that, he got framed for stealing and sent to the wall. And he's like, "You want to tell me about fair, John?" So, back to that whole... a lot of people have had it worse than you, John. Like your friend, Pip, for one. And Sam, after Pip goes away, Sam tries to explain to John, "Don't you understand what he's doing?" And John's like, "Oh, I just understand that Thorn hates me, and he's doing this to get revenge because he hates me so much, and that's why this happened." And Sam's like, "No, you're going to be Commander Mormont's steward. You know what that means, right?" And he tries to explain to John that Mormont picked him because he wants to groom him for leadership, is what Sam says. So Mormont sees that John could actually be the next leader of the Night's Watch. He has the ability and the skill and the intelligence, and that's why he got assigned to be Mormont's steward, so he can be right next to Mormont at all times and know exactly what's going on and how things are run and all of that. And that's why he got chosen to be a steward, but a steward for the commander. So Sam points that out to him. Makes John see it a little differently, so to speak. And then John says, "Yeah, I always did want to be a ranger, though." He gets it, but he's like, "Yeah, I always wanted to be a ranger, that's all. That's why I'm upset, because that's what he thought he was going to end up doing." And Sam's like, "Well, I always wanted to be a wizard." And they have a bit of a laugh about that. Even though we're in medieval times, Sam was definitely one of those D&D kids. And I'm not making fun of them because I did role-playing games too, so yeah. But yeah, so Sam always wanted to be a wizard. So that's the little happenings at the Night's Watch. And there's a few more caps here. But basically that's what we get from that, is all the guys were assigned to their places, and John is going to be groomed for command. And Samwell is going to be working for Maester Aemon. And Maester Aemon, we don't know a lot about him yet, but we know that Maesters are very important people. They're very intelligent, they're very smart, they know a lot of things about a lot of things, and they're the ones that run the day-to-day duties of the household, as well as being the in-house doctor, so to speak. So it looks like John and Sam both. I mean, I'm just guessing because none of this has happened on the show or in the book, but it looks like they're both being, well, I don't know about the books because I'm only book 2, but it looks like they're both being groomed to take very important spots in the Night's Watch at some point in time, because 2 of the most important people there are the ones that have taken each of them under their wing. So it looks like they're both going to have a very important role to play, or at least that's how I'm taking it. And like I said, this hasn't happened yet on the show, and I've only read up to book 2, so I don't know if it happens in the books yet either. I mean, I've heard things, but still nothing for sure, because you never know what to trust when you hear, "Oh, this supposedly happens and this supposedly happens." But yeah, it looks like they both are having big things planned for them. Of course, at the same time, you got to keep saying to yourself, "Don't make plans. This is Game of Thrones." So you never know. Don't make plans. You never know how much time you got left. Yes, this show has a short life expectancy for its characters. You'll see as you go on through. And it's one of the few shows that kill off main characters. Now, I'm not saying anything about Sam or John getting killed or anything, but yeah, don't think that anybody's safe, because nobody's safe in this show. Like Cersei said, you win or you die. So, all right, there's a couple more caps covering Jon's epiphany about why he got chosen to be Lord Commander Mormont's steward. And after that scene, we're going back to King's Landing. And we're going to start the scene with a little chat between Robert's youngest brother, Renly, and Ned Stark. And they're talking in the hallway, and he says that, oh, so Robert named you Protector of the Realm, huh? You're supposed to rule until Joffrey's old enough? Cersei won't care. He just says it like that. She won't care. She isn't going to honor that. So, that's what he's telling Ned's going to happen. And he says that I can put 100 swords at your back. And Ned's like, well, what would I want with 100 swords? And he says, don't you realize every moment gives Cersei more time to prepare? It's going to be too late by the time Robert dies for both of them, because Cersei's going to be in control. She's not going to care what Robert said, and she's not going to want either of us in the way, because she already hates Ned, and Renly wants to be king, so she isn't going to be too happy about him either. And he said that, and well, okay, here's, sorry, like I said, I don't sleep much. Okay, so Ned tells him that the throne should be passing to Stannis, not Joffrey, because Stannis is Robert's younger brother and Renly's older brother. And Renly says no. And he says that Stannis isn't a king. I am. So basically Renly tells Ned here that he wants to be king. And he says, well, you're Stannis' younger brother. He's before you. And Renly comes back with, well, what did the line of succession matter when you and Robert rebelled? And you need to think about what's best for the realm. Do you still think soldiers make good kings? Just because Stannis is a soldier doesn't mean he's going to be a good king. I mean, look at Robert. He was a good soldier too. So he says basically that Stannis inspires no love or loyalty, and that he would make a much better king. And Ned's just saying, you know, I'm not going to start a war. I'm not going to dishonor Robert by having bloodshed and capturing his children and all this other stuff. He's just going to tell them, you know, what he knows and say Stannis is going to be king and hope that it works out, I guess. And then we go to Ned sending a letter to Stannis, informing him about Cersei's kids. And he tells the guy, don't give it to anybody but Stannis. Hand it directly to Stannis. Don't let anybody else see this. And Baelish comes in, and Ned tells him, you know, Joffrey and Tommen and Myrcella, they don't have any real claims to the throne. Stannis is going to have to be the one that takes the throne once Robert dies. And you can see a look on Baelish's face. He does not like the idea of Stannis being in charge either. Now, I recall hearing some backstory about Stannis hates prostitutes and wanted to outlaw all prostitution once he became king. So yeah, I guess Baelish wouldn't be a fan of him if that was true. So, yeah, Baelish isn't thrilled about that idea. And he says, no, what you should do is you should go along with Cersei and let her put Joffrey on the throne. And then we can get rid of Stannis once Joffrey's on the throne. And then if Joffrey causes any problems, then we'll put Renly there once we get rid of Stannis. So put Joffrey there, get rid of Stannis, then put Renly in place as king. So that's Baelish's plan. And Ned is saying that's treason. That is not how it should be done. And Baelish says, well, it's only treason if we get caught. Yeah, so Yeah, I mean, I guess he's got a point there, but still. And he says he needs to make peace with the Lannisters and back Cersei and Joffrey. And Ned says, "Oh, you want me to make peace with the people who tried to kill my son twice?" And again, even though I hate Baelish, he has a good point. He's like, "Well, we only make peace with, people that we're not at peace with." So that's why it's called making peace. And Ned doesn't want to hear any of it, and he's saying, no, Stannis is the rightful heir. That's who's going to be on the throne. We're not going to do anything except that. And Baelish's like, so it will be Stannis in war. And Ned says there's no other choice. He's the heir. That's all there is to it, cut and dry. So Baelish says, okay, so why did you invite me here? It obviously wasn't for my wisdom. So, as much as I hate Baelish, he's making a lot of sense in this scene. I mean, I don't agree with everything he says, but he's making a lot of sense. So, basically, the reason Ned wanted to talk to Baelish is because he knows that he's going to have problems with getting Cersei to go along with this plan of putting Stannis on the throne. And he wants Baelish to pay the city watch to take his side because most of his household guard is dead because of, that little spat he had with Jaime. So he wants Baelish to pay the city watch to be on his side when he has to face Cersei because he knows that the Lannister men and the Kingsguard, well, at least the Lannister men, the Kingsguard are kind of going to be cut in the middle, I guess. But he knows that the Lannister men are going to be on Cersei and Joffrey's side, so he wants the city watch on his side. And he doesn't, and like Baelish says, it's not honorable, so he can't even ask him, but Baelish has already figured out what he wanted, that he wanted the city watch to be paid by Baelish to back him in the effort to get Stannis put on the throne instead of Joffrey. So, that is where that is left, with, when the hand says one thing and the queen says another thing. Who do they follow? It's the person that pays them. So, that's what's happening with the supposed line of succession and how that's going to be dealt with. So, I'm sure it will go well. So, anyway, after this scene, we're going back to the Night's Watch. And I have a lot of caps here, although not a lot of things happen in this scene. I mean, something important happens, obviously, but not too many different things happen in the scene. Basically, we see Sam and Jon going through the tunnel that leads through the wall because the heart tree where they're supposed to take their oath is a mile north of the wall, I believe they said. So, of course, Ghost is with them. Cute little Ghost. He's going out with them, and then the other officers of the Night's Watch are with them, and they're going off to this heart tree to take their oath. So, we can see them heading off towards this tree, and they go through their whole oath in front of the heart tree. And if that looks familiar to you, it's because those trees are the symbols of the old ways, the old gods. They're the white trees with the faces carved into them, and their sap and their leaves are red, so it almost looks like they're crying tears of blood. And the legend goes that the children of the forest carved the faces into the trees so they could watch over all their people. But when the religion of the Seven took over, almost all the trees were cut down. So the children of the forest could no longer, use their seers to see past, present, and future and look out for all their people because all their trees, all their eyes to the rest of the world were cut down, and there's only a few remaining, and most of the ones that are remaining are the ones in the north, like the one at Winterfell, and also this one here, which is north of the wall. But it's only a mile north of the wall. But still, north of the wall's never a fun place. So, anyway, they go through their whole Night's Watch oath, and the officer says, "You eldest boys, now rise as men of the Night's Watch." And they're all, getting congratulated, and Jon and Sam hug each other, and then Ghost comes back with something in his mouth. And as we get a better look, I mean, John says to me, Ghost, and Ghost brings over whatever he has found, and it turns out it is somebody's arm. No body, just an arm. That's not ominous at all. I'm sure nothing bad happened to lead to a severed arm lying around. And remember, we're north of the wall, where nothing strange is going on, right? So, it's a very quick scene, other than, they just go through the words of the oath, but it ends with, okay, we've got a severed arm, and what caused that? So you gotta keep that, ominous thing going. There's something out there, and it's killing people, it looks like. So, yeah. Now, we go back to the Dothraki people, and as you can see, the guy who tried to poison Daenerys is tied to a post and bleeding, and Dany asks what will happen, and he says that he's going to be lashed to the horses and dragged behind them when they travel again. And she says that, so Robert still wants me dead. And she said that she thought that he would leave her alone since her brother's dead. And, because women don't count, right? At least according to Westeros. Except Dorne. In Dorne, women count, but we'll talk about them later. But anyway, remember I said in another review, Dorne was settled by a warrior queen? So they have a little different rules in Dorne. But we don't hear much about Dorne yet in the show. But we're going to eventually, and I think I'm going to like Dorne a lot. I mean, it's not even on the show yet, but I think I'm going to like it a lot. But anyway, she says that she thought that she'd be left alone once her brother died, and Jorah says that he's never going to leave you alone. You're the last Targaryen, and your son is going to have Targaryen blood and 40,000 Dothraki warriors at his back. He is not going to let you be. So, you're going to be running from Robert forever. But she says, he won't have my son. And Jorah says, well, he won't have you either. So again, we're getting that Jorah has switched sides, it looks like. I mean, it looks like he's behind Dany 100% now. I mean, if that is truly the case, we'll have to see, but that's what it appears to be. So then Khal Drogo comes in. And by this time he has heard that this man tried to kill his pregnant wife. He is not happy. He goes over and, gives a little look to the guy who tried to kill her. And then he looks at Dany and goes over to her, and he's like, oh, are you alright? And, has a little romantic kiss with her to make sure, she's okay and she's safe. And as you can see, their marriage is really, really drastically changed since episode 1. So he is very upset about the fact that somebody tried to kill Daenerys and their baby. And he goes into this whole speech at this point. And he does the whole speech in Dothraki. Imagine learning those lines. But he does this whole speech in Dothraki. And he's saying that he is going to take his horses across the black salt sea, the poison water, I believe they call it, to the land where his queen is from, and where her father sat upon an iron throne, and he is going to basically, take down Westeros, is what he's saying. He is so upset about the fact that they sent somebody to kill Daenerys. That is what it takes for him to decide that he is going to declare war on Westeros because they tried to kill Daenerys and his baby. So he does this whole long speech about how he's going to go and, burn all the villages and the people and take them as slaves and give his son this iron chair. He's still calling it a chair because there is no throne, word for throne in Dothraki. So he does this whole he goes into it. He's just taken off. And the whole time he's doing his speech, you can see Daenerys looking at him like, wow, now he's gonna do this for me? Now he's gonna give me the throne? That's what it took? So she's watching him give this whole speech, and she just starts smiling and saying to herself, this is my warrior. This is the man who's going to get my throne back for me. I'm finally going to get what my brother always wanted and could never get. And she's just watching him go through his whole speech and just amazed that he wants to do all of this for her just because he's so infuriated about them trying to kill her. He's going to declare war on 7 kingdoms across a sea that they would never travel across before, just to get even with the man who tried to murder his wife and unborn child. So, Daenerys is seeing what kind of effect she has had on him and how much he actually does seem like he cares about her and wants to get revenge for them trying to take her and their baby away from him. So, she's got her Dothraki army and her warrior to lead her army and go to war against Westeros. So it looks like everything's falling into place for her. Guess we'll have to see where that goes. And then they show, after the big speech, them heading out of Vice Dothrak. You can see them there leaving the 2 horse statues that mark the entrance. And also, lashed to Dany's horse, the Silver, is the guy who tried to kill her, like Jorah had told her that he would be lashed and dragged behind the horses as punishment. So, then we go to our final scene. More fun happens in this scene. And somebody says that they're the servant guy, the messenger, I guess. He says that King Joffrey has called you to the throne room. And Ned says, King Joffrey? So he knows that Robert has died by this point now. So, and Joffrey is apparently being declared king. And he asks if, Renly's coming, and Varys says that Renly's fled the city. And Baelish tells him that the city watch is his. So, what they talked about, him paying off the city watch to back Ned. So Baelish tells him that they're his now. And that Renly fled. He left with Loras Tyrell and all of the Tyrell forces. And they're heading south to where the Tyrells are from. So Renly got out of Dodge, so to speak. He is not going to want to be there when this all goes down. So he's gone. And he took the Tyrells with him. And as he comes into the throne room, Janos Slynt, the leader of the City Watch, tells Ned, "Oh, we stand behind you." Like I said, I don't really like Janos much, but we'll see more of him later. Okay, so anyway, Ned brings his letter from Robert, or the will, I guess it is, and he says that nobody could doubt Sir Barristan's honor, so Sir Barristan should read it. So he takes the letter, and reads that Ned has been declared by Robert to be the Lord Regent and protector of the realm, to basically rule as king until the rightful heir comes of age. And so she's like, let me see that. And she looks at it, and she says, oh, is this meant to be your shield, Lord Stark? Is this what you think is going to protect you? And she rips up the paper. And Barristan says, well, those were the king's words. And her response is, oh, we have a new king now. So Renly was right. Cersei won't care, and she doesn't care. She's got what she wants. Her son is on the throne. She doesn't care what Robert said, because Robert's dead. Doesn't matter what he said. He's no longer in charge. And that's the way she sees it. So, she tells Ned that, oh, the last time we spoke, you gave me some advice, because it was when he told her to take her children and leave. She's like, I'm going to return this advice to you. You can take your children and go back to Winterfell and live out your days in that frozen wasteland, I think she says. But first, you have to bend the knee and swear fealty to my son Joffrey. So basically, I'll let you go as long as you say Joffrey is king and declare your loyalty to him. And of course, Ned, being Ned, and all about doing what's right and following the rules, he says, your son has no claim to the throne. Right there in front of everybody. He just spits it out. He says, your son has no claim to the throne. And, of course, Joffrey's screaming, kill him, kill him, kill them all, I command it. And Ned says to the City Watch, who he believes have been paid off to back him, he says, take the queen and her son into custody. Because, he's supposed to be the one ruling now. And they move like they're about to do what he says. And then all of a sudden they turn and kill what's left of his men. And Baelish comes up behind Ned with a knife to his throat. And of course the final line, I did warn you not to trust me. Yeah. Maybe you should have listened, Ned. Just maybe. So that's how that turned out. It looks like Renly was right. Cersei doesn't care about Robert's final words. They are not listening to him at all, even though Robert has declared him the ruler. And now he is letting his suspicions about Cersei's children be known to the rest of the capital, or at least all the people that were present there, and for it he gets the rest of his men killed, and a knife held to his throat by Peter Baelish, who, I believe it was Catelyn that said that he's a true friend, and she knew that she could trust him. Catelyn, who also took Tyrion prisoner and started all this crap. Yeah. You already know that I was a big fan of Catelyn because of the way she treated Jon. But then she takes Tyrion prisoner, convinces Ned to trust Baelish, and this is where it all leads to. All their men getting killed, Ned having a knife at his throat. And basically outing himself as an enemy of the throne, so to speak. So, good job, Catelyn, way to go. And good job, Ned, for actually believing that things would even be remotely by the rules. Even though Ned at this point has already seen what the Lannisters are like. But of course, he still thought that there was a chance that there'd possibly be some way to get them out of power, but all he's really done at this point is got himself in even more trouble than he already was in. So, I mean, as much as you want to like Ned and everything, I can see there are some similarities between him and Sansa. I mean, I'm just saying that, she still thinks that, there's a chance for them. And that things are going to be good and great. And she's going to live happily ever after with Joffrey. And Ned still believes that somehow he can still find a way to make sure justice is served. And that the right thing is done. And they both have these blinders on. And it's getting them in trouble. And I like Ned, I do. I like him a lot better than I like Sansa. But you can see some similarities there between him and Sansa. Believing that, something will go right. And obviously not a lot is going right here. But like I said, I still say Catelyn is greatly responsible for a lot of these things that have gone wrong. I mean, Ned too, because he's seen enough to know that there was no way Cersei was going to give in. There was no way she was going to back down and just lose all her power and her get her reputation tarnished by the truth of her children's births. But he still thought there was a chance, and he thought that he could trust Baelish, and it's just, sometimes you just want to shake Ned and say, what are you doing? Why can you not say this? But oh well, you win or you die. She told him. So, anyway, that is how episode 7 ends. Episode 7 of season 1, you win or you die. So even the title kind of makes you wonder how much longer he's going to be able to protect the rest of his people. I mean, all of his guards are already killed, and his daughters are still there, so who knows what's in store for them. Not to mention he himself, so yeah. You win or you die. And there is only 3 episodes left in season 1. And if you actually are a new viewer, you may not know this, but the 9th episode of the season is always a really important one. So we have that to look forward to as well. But still, with all shows, when the season's coming to a close, stuff's going to happen. Really big, important stuff. And we've already had big, important stuff happening in almost every episode. So the question is, where does it go from here? I guess you'll have to tune in and find out. So I'm going to try to get the next review out to you as soon as I can, and hopefully you'll tune in for that, and you'll like it, subscribe, make a comment, and as long as you're not being a troll or spoiling anything, I will approve your comment. So let me know what you think, and if you haven't watched the previous ones, go back and watch them. The first one has the sound a little bit funny on it, but the rest of them seem okay. So go and check them out, and I will see you next time.